you want to try and record too, Michael? And you're muted still.
There we go. Yeah, I can record too.
Good.
So I can find it, that is. Here it is. All right.
So let's bow in. Welcome to the Buddhist Path of Awakening course as we continue making our way through Patrul Rinpoche's The Words of My Perfect Teacher. And tonight, Michael is going to lead off. I've completely forgotten what chapter we're in. We're on section 2, Arousing Bodhicitta.
Mm-hmm. Welcome, everyone. And that's actually the title of the overall chapter as well, Arousing Bodhicitta, the Root of the Great Vehicle. Last week, we talked about the four immeasurables, which is one of the ways in which we can arouse compassion. Altogether, I think with the practice of the four immeasurables, arousing bodhicitta, we're talking about developing something that's naturally within us. But at the same time, if we don't recognize, if we don't know that we have it, we won't develop it. Trungpa Rinpoche, in talking about the four immeasurables, which we talked about last week, talked about them in regard to enlightened genes, which is just another way of talking about our innate compassion, our innate openness to all beings. Traditionally, it was often talked about as being like a seed, and that by providing the right conditions, we allow that seed to grow and develop. So that's what we're continuing to talk about tonight. Tonight, we're specifically talking about arousing bodhicitta. But one way of doing that, or one aspect of doing that, is practicing the four immeasurables: love, compassion, I forget the exact, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, which we talked about last week. But before we get into that, I actually wanted to talk about something that came up in a discussion group last week, but I think it relates as well to what we're talking about tonight. That in reading this chapter, we're presented with a number of concepts, ideas about things that we might experience. And that we have to approach this with our conceptual mind, because that's where we are. Ultimately, Buddhism is about non-conceptual wisdom. But in order for us to reach that point, we have to approach things conceptually. And this can work well in the sense that by understanding something such as compassion, when we talk about Mahamudra, Dzogchen, Rigpa, or natural mind, ordinary mind, in hearing descriptions of what that is, it helps us perhaps to recognize that. But it can also become an obstacle if we develop some concept that we then try to live up to, or if we approach this material from the point of view of some kind of moralistic should. And there's definitely a need to understand something of the path quality for how we develop these attributes, how we develop our inherent abilities, you could say. And I actually was reminded in doing this, and I believe I've shared some of this before, of some things that Joseph Goldstein says in his book, The Experience of Insight, which is actually a really good book. But basically, he's talking here about the development of generosity, which will actually be one of the things we'll talk about next week. But some of the ideas still apply, that it becomes a problem when we impose concepts on ourselves, but when we come to recognize opportunities, and when we come to developing our willingness to engage in certain kinds of activities, then this kind of approach can be very helpful. So he's talking mainly here about generosity, but as well you could think of this in terms of compassion or any of the other things that we're going to be talking about tonight. And what he says is, to begin with, the karmic results of generosity are abundance and a deep, harmonious relationships with other people. And he talks about three kinds of generosity. The first is a beggarly type of giving, where we only give with much hesitation, and then just the leftovers or what it is that we don't really particularly want or need. Secondly, he talks about friendly giving, which is more of a sharing of things that we do like and do enjoy. And finally, he talks about kingly giving, where we give away without regard to ourselves at all. So in terms of developing this kind of mentality, a mentality of generosity, he says that his glasses are helping less than I thought they would, unfortunately. That giving has to, that the highest kind of givers are kingly givers who offer the very best of what they have. They share spontaneously and in the moment without needing to deliberate. Giving has become natural to their conduct. Non-greed is so strong in their minds that at every opportunity they share what is treasured most in an easy and loving way. He says for some people giving is difficult. The greed factor is strong and there's a lot of attachment. For others, generosity comes easily. It doesn't matter. From wherever we're starting, we simply begin to practice. And this is the key thing. It doesn't matter. From wherever we're starting, we simply begin to practice. Every act of generosity slowly weakens the factor of greed. Sharing openly is a beautiful way to live in the world, and through practice, we can all become kingly givers. Then he says, there are two kinds of consciousness which are involved in our actions. One is called prompted consciousness, the mind which considers and deliberates before acting. The other is called unprompted and is very spontaneous. When a particular action has been cultivated, there is no longer the need to deliberate. Just in the moment, very spontaneously, this unprompted consciousness operates. Through practice, we develop the kind of consciousness where giving becomes the natural expression of mind. So that's what we're talking about, is through practice, we develop these capacities. In this case, he's talking about generosity. Tonight we'll be talking more about compassion, which obviously relates to generosity. But the point is that there's a path, and we have to start where we are. In the questions and answers that people ask him afterward, particularly again around generosity, but again, we could think about this in terms of any attribute that we're trying to develop along the path. One person says, for a while I found myself giving so much away, too much away. I got very strung out on giving. Could you talk about the nature of giving when it leads to feeling strung out? And his answer is, we are all at different levels. We're not all at the level of the Bodhisattva who gave his life to feed the tiger. This was actually the Buddha in one of his previous lives, where he gave his life to feed a hungry tiger and her cubs. We're not at the level of the Bodhisattva who gave his life to feed the tiger and her cubs. There might be a momentary impulse to do something like this, followed by many moments of regret. This is not skillful. We have to be sensitive to where we are in the present moment and cultivate generosity which feels appropriate. It grows. As we practice giving, it becomes increasingly spontaneous. And when it develops with that balance, then it's harmonious and there's no regret with what follows. And then another person questions, I see a conflict between being a kingly giver and being secure in the world. And his answer is, the cultivation of kingly giving does not necessarily mean that we go out and give everything away. It means giving with great openness, appropriate to the situation. We have a certain responsibility to ourselves to keep things together so we can continue the practice and cultivate the factors of enlightenment. The level of giving will very much depend upon the particular evolution of mind. There should not, this is I think the key point though, there should not be an image of how one should be giving and then trying to live up to that image. Simply, in the present moment, take opportunities to cultivate the factor of non-greed. It's not complicated. Let it unfold by itself. When it gets to the point where you're ready to fling yourself over a cliff to feed the tigers, you will. So again, the point is that there's a path quality to all of this, and that it's not a matter of imposing something on ourselves and trying to live up to some ideal that we imagine, but rather cultivating the qualities, our inherent compassion, our inherent generosity, our inherent awareness, without trying to put ourselves in some kind of straitjacket of what we think we should be. So I think this is, I just wanted to share that because it was helpful to me, what he said. So I hope it's helpful to everyone else. So with that, we can talk about arousing bodhicitta. So the basic definition of bodhicitta is the wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. And again, this section is entitled Arousing Bodhicitta. And right away, there's a footnote where it talks about the particularly word arousing, and says that it's has actually several different meanings in the Tibetan or the Sanskrit. It's just one translation of that word. The word means to give birth to produce, but also to make grow, to develop. As well, the word that relates to bodhicitta, that was arousing. The word that relates to bodhicitta also has several levels of meaning. For the beginner, it's simply the intention to liberate all beings, but in a deeper sense, bodhicitta is a synonym for Buddha nature, which is, again, the fundamental true nature of our mind. At this level, it's not something to be produced that was not there before, because it's the fundamental nature of our mind, which has always been with us and only has to be discovered and made manifest. And for that reason, they use the word arouse. So again, one aspect of these teachings is to help us recognize our true nature and become increasingly familiar with it. And as we do that, these qualities that are being described to us develop and grow. We cultivate these qualities through these various practices. So with that, in this chapter, it begins with classifications, different kinds of classifications of bodhicitta. And all of these are meant to help us understand something about, again, what we're practicing as path here. So again, it's bodhicitta clearly involves compassion and love, but it also involves this wish to attain Buddhahood. There's some recognition, if not recognition, that only by developing the complete wisdom and openness, prajna of a Buddha can we really truly help beings. And in the first set of classifications, we're really talking about different ways of expressing that wish, the wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. When we practice in the morning and the evening, we actually remind ourselves of this wish. It's very simply stated in the chant, in order that all beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. That's the wish. That in itself is an expression of bodhicitta. So basically, the text begins by describing three levels of bodhicitta. One is that which is like a king, where in the description is the king begins by having to overcome rivals and be able to take control of the kingdom. I guess nowadays we could think about this in terms of becoming a politician, a president or something. And then once they do, then they work for the benefit of beings. So this is similar to the wish to attain Buddhahood first, and then from that work for the benefit of all sentient beings. The second level is the courage of a boatman. In this case, it's like a boatman who ferries people across a river or a stream. And the idea here is that we arrive together with all sentient beings, or with as many beings as we can bring, so that the enlightenment, Buddhahood, is achieved all together. So the first one is called arousing bodhicitta of the great wish. The great wish being that we free all sentient beings. This one is called arousing bodhicitta with great wisdom. Why that is, I'll say in a moment, at least why I think it is. And the third one is the courage of a shepherd. And the idea is that a shepherd, in tending to his flock, waits behind and makes sure that everyone else, all the sheep, get through safely and takes care of any sheep that are struggling or having any kind of difficulty. So in this case, we decide for ourselves that we will become enlightened after everyone else. And this is called the arousing bodhicitta beyond compare. The underlying theme here is the degree to any one of these is good. That's the first thing. It's sort of like a good, better, best, not in the sense of any kind of moralistic thing. It's just more a question of the degree to which we let go of a self-centered attitude or any kind of self-focus in terms of our practice. But any one of these three is a positive wish. And any one of these three is good. As it says in the text, Maitreya aroused bodhicitta in this way. Maitreya was enlightened. And Manjusri developed bodhicitta in the third way. In my experience, I'm going to guess this is true for people, all of us, that from time to time, any one of these ideas comes up. That sometimes we do think, I need to, or I want to, work with myself first, and then I can help other beings. And then sometimes we really have that wish. I wish we could bring I could bring everyone through. And sometimes perhaps we have the courage, the wish of the shepherd, that we take care of everyone else. And then when we know that everyone else is enlightened, then that everyone else is in a good place, then we can imagine ourselves finishing the journey ourselves. In the commentary, it talks about the three mainly in terms of the speed with which one realizes Buddhahood. With the third, the courage of the shepherd being the quickest path to enlightenment. And again, this relates entirely to one of the great obstacles to developing compassion, which is the self-centered attitude or self-cherishing attitude. So basically, that's one set of classifications of bodhicitta, particularly the classifications around the wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. But again, any wish to benefit sentient beings is positive. So again, we could just see what possibilities we experience in the moment and act as best we can then. Act in the moment, as Joseph Goldstein said, based on as best we can how we are in the moment. The second set of classifications it's according to the bodhisattva levels. And this is a very short paragraph that actually we could talk about for quite a while, because what it relates to are what are traditionally called the 5 paths, and within that the 10 bhumis. So the 10 bhumis are different, probably the best translation might be stages, maybe levels, different stages that a bodhisattva goes through in terms of increasingly approaching Buddhahood. But the 5 paths begin with the paths of accumulation and the path of joining. Sometimes it's translated in different ways. I think Trungpa Rinpoche called the path of joining the path of unification. Sometimes you'll see it as the path of juncture. And at that point, what's being accumulated is understanding. So 2 accumulations of wisdom and merit. Earlier, some of the earlier chapters that we read in this text talk about the 10 non-virtuous and the 10 virtuous actions. And it's through practicing those that we begin to let go of the degree to which we're captured and caught up in the kleshas and begin to develop some clarity, as well as path, through the accumulation of wisdom, begin to develop some understanding of path altogether. So those are the path of accumulation and the path of joining are the first of the 2 paths. The third path is the path of seeing. And what happens there is begin to have some experiences, I think as it says a little later in the text, of thusness, things as they are. So and it's also a true realization, a true experience of emptiness. And traditionally speaking, this is when one formally enters the bodhisattva path. And then the 4th path is the path of meditation, which essentially is going through the bhumis, through bhumis 1 through 7. The first 6 bhumis relate directly or connect directly to the 6 paramitas, up to generosity, discipline, patience, exertion, meditation and prajna. And the final three are called those are all called impure for a reason that I'll get to in a moment. The final three bhumis, 8, 9, and 10, are considered pure bhumis. And then with that, then there's what's called the Vajra-like Samadhi and Buddhahood, at least from a Mahayana point of view. And basically, bodhicitta at each level there's a different experience or a different method, you could say, I guess, to arousing bodhicitta. On the path of accumulation and the path of joining, which is, I think, where we all are at, it's arousing bodhicitta by practicing with aspiration. Again, it's developing that wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. It's the experience of compassion, love and compassion that motivates that wish. So that's developing the aspiration. At the level of from the first through the seventh bhumi, those levels of bodhisattvahood, it's called arousing bodhicitta through excellent and complete and perfectly pure intention. And then finally, on the three pure levels, bhumis 8, 9, and 10, it's called arousing fully matured bodhicitta, because at that point, a person's developed enough to truly be able to help sentient beings. And then finally, with Buddhahood, there's the complete, as it says, freedom from all obscurations. So basically, at the path of accumulation and joining, in commentary, it says that we may be able to arouse pure relative bodhicitta, and have developed some understanding of absolute bodhicitta, but it's generated by thought, and therefore it's not permanent. But we can get a taste of it at least. And it's a view of bodhicitta, absolute bodhicitta, that we develop through inference. And then it's only with the path of seeing when we actually begin to wake up to things as they are, thusness, emptiness appearance, that things really change. Then on the impure levels, which are the bhumis 1 through 7, beginning with the paramita of generosity, what happens is emotional obscurations are directly eliminated in meditation practice, but there's still clinging thoughts that can arise in post-meditation, but they're not acted on. So the idea is that whatever occurs, whatever subtle, as it says in the commentary, whatever subtle self-centered thoughts arise, are just naturally purified or not acted on. And then on the pure level, what happens is there's this complete freedom from emotional obscurations, the kleshas, and increasingly the subtle conceptual obscurations are clarified. So again, this relates to, this entire path through the bhumis relates to what are traditionally called the two obscurations, what are usually called the afflictive or emotional obscurations, which are the kleshas, and the cognitive obscurations. So it's said that thoughts of such as miserliness or aggression, those are afflictive or emotional obscurations. And subtle thoughts, all subtle thoughts of subject, object, and action, any kind of duality essentially, are the cognitive obscurations. And that's what is worked through on the bhumis. So that's very short summary of the 5 paths and the 10 bhumis. Then there's classification according to the nature of bodhicitta, and this is the more traditional one, but basically it's defined as relative and absolute bodhicitta. As it says in the commentary, relative bodhicitta is aroused and dissolves with our thoughts, whereas absolute bodhicitta is that state of primordial wisdom in which all the movements of conceptual mind, all conceptual thoughts have subsided into absolute space. So absolute bodhicitta is complete, full Buddhahood awareness. Relative bodhicitta is what we practice in order to reach that point where we're able to let go of the cognitive and emotional obscurations. Relative bodhicitta has 2 classifications or 2 aspects, intention and application. We've studied this before. Trungpa Rinpoche called these 2 aspects of relative bodhicitta aspiring and entering. So with intention or aspiring, we have developed the wish to make the journey. We develop the wish to, again, develop enlightenment, become enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings. With application, we actually begin the journey. We actually make the effort. This is what Trungpa Rinpoche called entering. Sometimes he said it was that aspiring bodhicitta was like wanting to go on a journey. Entering or application was like actually buying the ticket and making the journey, beginning to make the journey. So those are the two aspects of relative bodhicitta, which is what we work with. And again, as it says in the commentary, we begin this on the level of thoughts, and it comes and goes on the level of our thoughts as well. But again, the more we develop the habit, the more we let go of, in particular, self-centered thinking, which again is the most, that and aggression, which are the two real obstacles to developing bodhicitta. The closer we get, the more and more we go from, as Joseph Goldstein said, from prompted to unprompted, where we're just able to spontaneously act in the moment because we practice. And again, this is exactly what the Buddha taught. It said that when the Buddha was teaching generosity, he had some people just practice giving something from one hand to the other, just to develop, again, just the mental habit, to plant the seed that could, again, later develop into some type of greater generosity or compassion. Absolute bodhicitta is, as it says in the text, through training for a long time in relative bodhicitta, again it mentions the two paths of accumulation and joining, we come to the path of seeing, where we have the real experience of thusness, the natural state of all things. And this is absolute bodhicitta. Again, it's open mind. And again, we have glimpses of this as we practice, but at the path of seeing, it's considered irreversible, that we just go with that. From there he talks about, he quotes the verse, we actually read this verse before from Nagarjuna, where with this he talks about how to arouse bodhicitta, and talks about that for absolute bodhicitta is attained by the power of meditation, but that relative bodhicitta is developed through ritual and repeated practice, repeatedly, as he says, continually renewing the vow. And then, so in this text, there's a description of, take a bodhisattva vow, beginning with visualizing that all Buddhas and bodhisattvas are present. This is, in essence, taking refuge. And taking them as witness, and then contemplating. And he gives how we could contemplate that all beings have, at some time or another, have been our parents, that they've taken care of us. We have some recognition that all beings are suffering now. And with that, we have developed the desire to take care of, to be able to liberate all beings. With this, we make the determination that we'll awaken bodhicitta, that we'll develop our love, compassion, our capacity for sympathetic joy and equanimity, so that we actually can be responsive to all sentient beings. And again, with that attitude, which in summary says that we have compassion for beings, led astray by myriad appearances like reflections of the moon and water, beings wander in the endless chain of samsara. So the idea of being led astray by the myriad appearances like reflections on water refers to how beings are trapped in illusory appearances, primarily the belief in an ego, the belief in a self, and all of the evil and all of the difficulty, stress, and struggle that comes out of holding on to a sense of personal identity that's ultimately not existent, just like the reflection of the moon in the water. So to bring them to rest in the radiant space of awareness, with the four boundless qualities, I arouse bodhicitta. Four boundless qualities being what we've talked about last week: love, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And then, as he says, we visualize the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front of us. We end by dissolving them back into us, that their absolute bodhicitta, their bodhicitta becomes part of our existence. And then he says we could make the following wishing prayer. This is actually from Nagarjuna, May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. So this verse might seem familiar to you because we studied it before when we read Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva. In the introduction, they quoted this verse as really describing the overall organization of that entire text. That the first chapter is on arousing bodhicitta and confession, if you remember, related to the first. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be. We want to give birth to this wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And where it has arisen, may it never fail. And that relates to the paramita practices, which we'll be talking about next week, and which we've talked about before, of generosity, discipline, and patience. And then finally, may it but grow and flourish ever more and more, which refers to the paramita practices of exertion, meditation, and prajna. So again, we just develop this wish that we develop bodhicitta, that it never fail, and that it grow and flourish more and more. So again, it's describing a path quality here. Then there's a summary of some of the benefits of developing bodhicitta, the most powerful being that it just energizes and directs our entire path in the right direction, in terms of letting go of ego, letting go of self-cherishing, letting go of a self-centered attitude, and fully letting go of, again, the emotional or afflictive obscurations and the cognitive obscurations. Without bodhicitta, none of the other Buddhist paths will bring us to the level of perfect Buddhahood, it says. And it makes every practice far, far, far more powerful and effective. So the arousing bodhicitta is quite important. And he says the teacher who gives us instructions on arousing bodhicitta is setting us on the path of the great vehicle. So their kindness is greater than that of the teacher, any other teacher who gives you any other instruction. It's the power of bodhicitta. It's said without compassion, enlightenment is not possible. So it's absolutely key to the path. And again, we want to renew this vow again and again. Go through this practice again and again, which we do. As I say, every morning we recite, and every evening when we do our practice as a group here, in order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood. From my heart, I take refuge in the three jewels. That's where we make this wish most fervently, but it's actually in all of the chants to some degree. It makes the point that we want this to we actually want to feel this. We actually want to experience this. That the love and compassion of bodhicitta must really be alive in us. That just to recite the formula many hundreds of thousands of times without taking the meaning to heart, without really making it our personal experience, it's utterly pointless. So again, it's something that we really lean into. Again, not as a should, but just as more of a waking up to this possibility of arousing bodhicitta. So again, it's the combination of love and compassion for all beings, along with the wish to attain enlightenment for the sake of all beings. That's what makes it bodhicitta. It's not compassion alone, although love and compassion are clearly motivating, powerful force, but it includes also that wish to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So with that, I'll turn it over to John to talk about training in the bodhicitta precepts.
Thank you, Michael. This chapter makes me think a lot about the little that I do to help others and how much more it could be. And really, what we're being asked to do is to do a great deal more, to be of benefit to others. One of the things I do is to visit a friend of mine, maybe twice a month, who is in a nursing home. He's about 6 years younger than I, and he has severe Parkinson's disease. to the point where he can't move, really. He can't raise his arms to any great degree. Certainly can't walk. He's in a wheelchair. His speech is a whisper, which makes us a difficult pair because I have hearing aids and hearing aids are lousy, so I can barely hear what he has to say. I'm going to read you his bio. His name is Bill McKeever. William McKeever has been a student of Shambhala and Buddhism since 1972 when he met Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche while getting his degree in Buddhist studies at Yale. Immediately following graduation, he moved to Tail of the Tiger, now Karmay Choling, to begin his Dharma study, practice, and teaching. McKeever has served as director of Karmay Choling, vice president of Naropa University, where he coordinated the university's successful accreditation effort. His title may have been vice president, but he was the head of Naropa at that time. Faculty member of Naropa's Graduate Department of Contemplative Psychotherapy, founding director of the Ryuko Kyudojo, assistant director of education for Nalanda Foundation, as well as a member of the Shambhala Board of Directors under Sakyong Mipam Rinpoche. He has been a member of the Shambhala Trust since its inception in 2002 and served as its chairman. He has taught at many Shambhala programs from 1975 through 2005. In 1992-2001, he served as director of Asian activities at the prestigious New York-based Asia Society, which educates Americans about Asian cultures and contemporary affairs. While at Asia Society, he opened regional offices in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Manila, Melbourne, San Francisco, and Seattle. He has also led tours to Mongolia, Burma, Bhutan, India, China, and Central Asia. Most recently, he became a senior program advisor to the Garrison Institute, a new ecumenical retreat and conference center on the Hudson River north of New York City. He has 4 adult sons, Noah Davis, Jonathan, Edward, and Montfort. And now, Bill lives a life mostly isolated. Few people visit him. I visit him a couple of times a month. Life is uncertain. It's really something. And there's so much more that I could do. I'm going to read a quote from the last part of what Michael covered. I forget where this is from. It doesn't really say in my notes. Ho, led astray by myriad appearances, like reflections of the moon in water. Beings wander in the endless chain of samsara. To bring them rest in the radiant space of awareness, with the 4 boundless qualities, I arouse bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, awakened mind, full of compassion, clarity, and true seeing. There's a footnote that says, the moon's reflection in water appears vividly, but has no true independent existence. The same is true of what we perceive through the senses, since phenomena are empty of any objective essence. However, we are led astray by the belief that those appearances are objectively real. It is this fundamental confusion which is the basis for the negative emotions that make us wander in samsara. So, arousing bodhicitta, among other things, has to do with arousing compassion in oneself and acting on it, doing more to help others. We're really being asked to do so much more than most of us, anyhow, currently do. So, this begins with training in the bodhicitta precepts. And it starts out by talking about the difference between the bodhicitta of intention which the training has 3 stages. Intention means it's like setting out on a journey. You're intending to set out. Then, still as part of the bodhicitta of intention, you actually do set out. This training has 3 stages: considering others as equal to oneself. There's a challenge. Exchanging oneself and others, as we do in Tonglen, but much more powerfully than what we might do just sitting here for 10 minutes in the morning. Taking others is more important than oneself. That's the 3rd one. For the bodhicitta of application, the training consists of practicing the 6 transcendent perfections: generosity, discipline, energy, I'm forgetting them all, meditation, prajna, I've left one out. It can help me. Those 6 transcendent paramitas. And then the 7th, interestingly, is kind of a ringer. It's a difficult one. It's upaya, skill in means. And it's the bridge between the 6 ordinary or more ordinary, but they're still transcendent perfections, and then the 3 higher ones, which really are leading into Buddhahood. All of these are only available once we begin to enter the 3rd path that Michael described, the path of seeing. And what this is the beginning of that, this is why I read that little footnote about perceiving phenomena as empty, because that is the entrance into the path of seeing. The path of seeing means emptiness, seeing and understanding shunyata, reality. When one begins to do this, begins to have glimpses of shunyata and more, one begins to truly enter the bodhisattva path with the very first bhumi, the first stage of 10, which is characterized by the transcendent virtue of generosity. Because understanding emptiness, we understand that I and other do not exist. They are complete fictions, neurotic, confused creations. And so true generosity begins to arise, because our actions are no longer informed by this myth of self-interest. So really, the whole key to entering and training in the bodhicitta precepts that we're going to be talking more about next week has to do with this entrance into shunyata, this discovery of emptiness that takes place at the end of the first 2 paths, the path of, I forget what they're called actually, development and unification, which are purely Hinayana paths. They have to do with collecting all of the sort of the understandings and propensities that are making us likely to become bodhisattvas and understand, enter the path of shunyata. Those are the first 2 paths, and then the 3rd path is key. With that 3rd path, with the understanding and the development and the beginning to see and live in emptiness, shunyata, true reality, we begin to really progress along the path. And as Michael said, the 4th path, which is called the path of meditation, means that once we have seen emptiness, we come back to it again and again. That's what meditation means at this point, is that we come back to this, seeing this world as being empty of I and other, as being extraordinarily vivid, beautiful, moving, arousing and arising now. And so we pass through this path of meditation, and the 5th path is called the path of no more learning, meaning Buddhahood itself, which is not even really a path. It's just the state of Buddhahood, awakening. So, we start out training in the bodhicitta precepts. There are 3 stages. Considering the other as equal to oneself is 1. Number 2 is exchanging oneself for others. And 3 is taking others as more important than oneself. Then beyond that, for the bodhicitta of application, the training consists of practicing the 6 paramitas, the 6 transcendent perfections. So the first of these 3, the bodhicitta of intention, considering others as equal to oneself. And he says, Patrul Rinpoche, the reason we have been wandering in samsara's ocean of suffering from time without beginning, wow, we've been doing this, is that we believe in an I where there is no I, in a self where there is no self, and that we make that self the sole object of our affection. This is the core, the belief in I, self, and other. Instead, reflect as follows. We want to be happy constantly and never to suffer, and will do anything, many things, to this end. Killing a louse in anger, for example, which is surely the cause of rebirth in hell. How many, boy, I got time in hell coming. We should be ashamed to find such small discomforts so hard to bear, and to react in a way that causes so much pain to another being, however small and diminutive. The flies on our windows, whatever it might be. Most beings devote their times to the 10 harmful actions. This is killing, stealing, lying, having improper sexual relations, and drinking alcohol. And those are 5, and I forget what the other 5 are. That bring on happiness, and harmful actions that bring suffering. They say that if you drink a lot of alcohol, you're going to commit the other 4, by the way. Of all those beings, there is not a single one who has not at some moment, throughout time without beginning, been apparent to us. Not a single being in all of the beings, animal realm, praetor realm, hell realm. And you know the hell realm is the most populous of all the realms. The praetor realm is the next most populous. The animal realm is the next. Then the human realm. Then the jealous God realm and the God realms have fewer beings. Of all those beings, there is not a single one who has not, at some moment throughout time without beginning, been apparent to us. Now that we are disciples of an authentic spiritual teacher, we ought to be caring lovingly for our old mothers, so enslaved by their confusion, and we should stop seeing any difference between them and us, he says. In short, seeing no distinction between yourself and all living creatures of the 3 worlds, make it your sole mission to find ways of making every one of them happy now and for all time. So think of others as being equal to yourself. What an injunction. What a task we are being given. The second one, exchanging oneself and others. This is basically Tonglen, but taken to its extreme. Breathe in all kinds of suffering from others and breathe out, giving the other person your happiness and the best of everything you have. Gradually extend this practice from one person to include all living beings. Make the strong wish that all other beings' suffering may ripen in you, that all their suffering may ripen in you, and that they may be freed from suffering and be happy. Whenever you're happy or feel good, generate the wish that your happiness might extend to bring happiness to all beings. This bodhicitta practice of exchanging oneself and others is the ultimate and unfailing quintessential meditation for all those who have set out on the path of the Mahayana teachings. I mean, this is no excuses. This is getting down to the real nitty-gritty of the core of what we're being asked to do. This is no longer just pure theory. If you really experience that exchange happening even once, it will purify the negative actions and obscurations of many kalpas, long periods of time, and create an immense accumulation of merit and wisdom. These are the 2 accumulations, the 2 benefits, merit and wisdom. It will save you from the lower realms and from any rebirths that might lead to them. Not that that's a proper motivation. It's somewhat of a motivation, but the main motivation should be the pleasure, the joy, the genuine, heartfelt feeling of being of benefit to others. And then there are many stories, and I'm just going to read a few towards the end of this, many stories about the Buddha and other beings demonstrating this kind of generosity and compassion. There's the story of Vallabha's daughter, who becomes one kind of merchant after another until finally he became what he's called Daughter. His father named him Daughter. Until finally he became what his father had been, a sea captain in search of jewels, journeying by sea to wreck, and then a town called Joy, then a town called Joyous, then a town called Intoxication, then to Guru Brahma's castle, then to the south where he experienced pain that awakened in him a feeling of intense compassion for all those in the same state as himself, so that he expressed the wish to take on the suffering of others like himself. Quote, immediately, the wheel that had been crushing his brain flew up into the air, his agony ceased, and he soared up to the height of 7 palm trees in a state of bliss. So the bodhicitta practice of exchanging oneself with others is the ultimate, the indispensable method for attaining enlightenment. Indeed, the Kadampa masters, these are the people who were students of Atisha, the great teacher who came to Tibet in the 12th century and whom we've studied. Indeed, the Kadampa masters of the past used to make it their main practice with this slogan: offer gain and victory to others, take loss and defeat for yourself. Finally, he talks about the 8 verses of Langri Tangpa. There is no better instruction for dispelling the sickness and sufferings of this life and for subjugating spirits, negative forces, and obstacle makers than this bodhicitta meditation of exchanging oneself for others. Meditate on it with perseverance, always rejecting like poison the negative mentality which gives so much importance to yourself. Then there's considering others as more important than yourself. This is the second we're working up. And there's a quote, I may be in samsara, I may be reborn in hell, I may be ill, feverish, or suffering from any other misfortune, but I will bear it all. May the sufferings of others ripen in me. May other beings have all my happiness and all the effects of my good action. He says, arouse this thought and put it into action, following the example of Atisha's teachers, Maitri Yoga and Dharma Rakshita, and of our teacher Shakyamuni, in his rebirths as King Padma, as a turtle, and as King Manukuda. Maitri Yoga taking upon himself the pain caused by a stone hitting a dog. Remember that one? He witnesses somebody throwing a stone at a dog, and he cries out in pain and falls down. And they say, but the stone didn't hit you. And then he pulls up his shirt to reveal the mark on his back from the stone. The master Dharma Rakshita started out as a Shravaka Pandita of the Vaibhashika school. That's the very first stage on the path. Vaibhashika, there are 4 main schools: Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Yogacara, and Madhyamaka. The Vaibhashika is the first school, first stage on the path. And when one enters that, you become a Shravaka. That means a hearer, somebody who listens to the teachings. So Dharma Rakshita had a natural affinity to the Mahayana, and without any deliberate effort, he was filled with great compassion. And he cuts off a part of his leg to cure a sick man, and then suffers. But his wound is healed in a dream by a white man who was the great compassion one. That's Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion. The authentic realization of the natural state then dawned in Dharma Rakshita's mind, and the words of Nagarjuna's 5 treatises on the middle way were ceaselessly on his lips. Then there's the story of Shakyamuni as a king called Padma, who prayed to be reborn. He The people in his time were sick, and they could only be cured by the flesh of a rohita fish, of which there were none. So he killed himself praying to be reborn as a rohita fish, and was, and then offered his flesh to everyone in order that they may achieve a cure. And there's more stories about him being reborn as a giant sea turtle who carried drowning people to safety and then gave its life away. The Buddha is born in the land of Saketa as the son of a king, and always distributing largesse to the poor, putting an end to poverty and begging, and so forth, and more. I'm going to end here and just read a couple of these stories right from the book. I thought that would be fun. I hope. I've already covered 2 of them. Okay. Another time, Shakyamuni had been reborn as a giant turtle when a boat transporting 500 merchants was wrecked at sea. They were all about to drown, but the turtle called out to them in human speech, "Get up on my back, I will carry you all to safety." The turtle carried all the merchants to dry land and then collapsed, exhausted by the water's edge, and fell asleep. But as it slept, a cloud of 80,000 Kataka flies began to suck its blood. Waking up, it saw how many they were and realized that to go back into the water or roll on the ground would kill all the insects. So it just lay where it was, giving them its life. Later, when the turtle became the Buddha, the flies were the 80,000 gods who listened to his teachings and perceived the truth. I'll read this one about Maitri Yogi, Atisha's teacher, was expounding the Dharma when a man nearby threw a stone at a dog. The master yelled with pain and fell from his throne. Other people present, seeing nothing the matter with the dog, thought that Maitri Yoga must be pretending. But Maitri Yogi, who knew that what they were thinking, showed them his back, on which the welt of the stone that had been thrown at the dog was clearly visible. Everyone was convinced by the evidence. He had physically taken upon himself the pain caused by the stone hitting the dog. So there are all these stories, but basically we are being asked over and over again to practice compassion, generosity, Maitri for other beings. And when I think about it, I mean, for myself, there's so little I do in this way, and I could do so much more. It requires making an effort. So I'm developing more resolve to do this. Stay tuned. And maybe some of you are already doing it, or will do it, to be of benefit to other sentient beings. So that's it. We could have a discussion. Maybe someone here in Colorado Sarah Lucy, the next time you're in Boulder, could go visit Bill McKeever. Say I sent you. I mean, he just lives alone in this room with one other person in a bed next to him, separated by a curtain. He can't do much. There's a TV, which he never seems to watch. Can't read or write. I try to communicate with him. I've tried by email. That doesn't work. This is a guy who was head of Naropa. Was one of the main people responsible for its accreditation and many other things. He was head of Karmi Choling. Parkinson's has been coming on for him for many years. Many years. This is the same nursing home where Tanya Leontoff, one of Trungpa Rinpoche's very first students in England and then here in America, who had the Tibetan refuge name of Kason. She died in this same home about a year or two ago. Getting to that time of life. Shinny, you look like you have something to say.
Maybe. So I was just thinking, when I die, I hope I die with bodhicitta. I was reading an instruction by Dzongsa Rinpoche to a student of his who was also a student of Trungpa Rinpoche. I think his name was Tom Crow or something. Can check it out real quick. Yeah, Tom Crow. He was a long time Sangha member and early student of Trungpa Rinpoche.
How do you spell
He
it?
was also Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche student.
How do you spell that?
Tom, as in Tom, Crow, as in the bird, Crow. Okay, but anyways, he emphasized that keep on taking the bodhisattva vow that you will never rest until all sentient beings are awakened again and again. So anyways, he had an instruction for Tom, which was played during his transition and at the Sukhavati ceremony, and it was what I felt was something that was really emphasized when you approach death, because I think when you die with the mind of bodhicitta, you are no longer so much clinging to the attachments that you have for your life or for the possessions you have or relationships, but you are thinking of a broader mindset, and death seems to be okay when you're thinking about a multi-life journey or whatever it is. Because you're doing this for the sentient beings, you're not thinking about yourself. So that's what I was thinking.
Thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. I think it emphasizes how radical this path truly is. In joining us to make a very fundamental change. Michael?
I was going to say, when I first came to Boulder, so when I was definitely a very raw beginning student, I lived at Marpa House, and there were two people living there who had end-of-life illness, cancer and emphysema, COPD. And for both of them, Trungpa Rinpoche had them do Tonglen practice. That was his main instruction to both of them.
Wow. I feel this book is really no excuses. It's giving us the way. We can take it or not, but it's giving us the absolute true path. We're all fortunate, too, that we come from the lineage of Trungpa Rinpoche, who I feel basically was an enlightened master. And In other texts, they emphasize how important it is that you have that in your lineage. It changes the path. So many people haven't spoken. Is this material too provocative? Too demanding? Ed,
Well, given that invitation, I'll share a thought, uh, which we can easily do in our daily interactions when, so many things that we do, uh, going to the checkout counter in the supermarket, or filing out a form at a window, wherever. And our natural tendency is, after you finish your transaction, whatever type of transaction it is at the bank or wherever, you just move on. But sometimes life will give you an opportunity to listen to the other person, and that person sometimes needs to share whatever is bothering her or whatever, and we easily run on to the next thing that we have to do. It's not all that difficult to take time and just listen, and open up your heart, and thank the person for helping you in whatever she or he did for you, and allowing the person to have a moment of sharing her sadness or whatever it is.
thank you. That's wonderful. I think of how many times I've checked out at a supermarket with almost no communication between me and the checker. Pay and go. Philip.
This is very much related to what you just said, Ed. But we can certainly extend that notion of thinking of other people as being more important than ourselves, even with people that are very familiar to us, people we live with and people we love, simply by approaching conversation differently. We can stop talking on our half and just listen.
Yes. Well said. Trip, you're actually engaged in running a company. Does this have any significance for you, your interactions with the people who work for you?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Starting with what, Ed and Philip, what you're talking about, the idea of listening, especially with staff members who are dealing with 98-degree temperatures. They're working very hard. They've got families and trials and tribulations. And I would say that often that saying of, finish the conversation with the person you're right in front of. That's the opportunity with the staff, is to sit and listen and to ask some questions about how they're doing. So yeah, and I would, I'm thinking too, what I was thinking about is, first things first is not to shed one's misery on others. And I was thinking how irritable I was this morning as I tumbled out of my truck, no AC in my apartment. It's like 100 degrees, and I was tired and grumpy, and my business partner was sitting there, and my iPad tumbled out, and I was like, God damn it. And I looked at my partner, and he was looking at me, and I could I saw that my negative vibe was what even though it was kind of tongue in cheek, it was still a negative vibe for his start to the day. And so I think paying attention to how we process our own frustrations has everything to do with everybody else. So it's a powerful message to really, if possible, start with equanimity and listen. Yeah.
And respond with kindness. Wow, there's a challenge.
Yeah, and so there is something too. Is I think that responding with bona fide kindness is almost counterintuitive. Like to almost to flip it, and instead of voicing a frustration with somebody, flip it and say, "Wow, great job." If somebody comes to you and says they've made a mistake, and you look at them and they're afraid you're going to say something, and then you find the positive in what they did, and you point out the opportunities that emerge from it. That's really, for me, that's an opportunity of compassion where you can actually shift it from somebody expecting an admonition or to have to be blamed for something, and to the contrary, hearing affection and understanding and empathy and commiseration. I think there are a lot of opportunities like those in every interaction, but certainly in our work life.
I wonder if there's a way this group could do something together to benefit other beings. So I guess I'm asking you to think about it. Steve.
So what are some of the things you can say or do with someone who is developing cancer?
Cancer?
Cancer. And that is non-recoverable. So they're facing the end of their life due to the cancer. What are some of the ideas of showing compassion to this person at that point in their life?
What comes to your mind?
Listening and commiserating with their pain and showing your love to them as they face this challenge.
Yeah. Maybe asking if there are things that you can do for them. To help them. Things that they need or want.
Certainly.
Yeah, no, but I agree with you. Anybody else have anything to say? That's certainly.
I found that, this is Ed, in an instance like that, I try to tell the person what a great job they've done in whatever it was they were doing. So help them realize their own sense of self-worth. Even now, I mean, at a time like that, where everything is so bleak and a person is really wondering about their own worth, right? Their own value. Remind them of how, as we Buddhists would say, in relative terms, they have been helpful or productive or successful, or the happiness that they brought to others. So, I mean, that's a task and has to be, thoughtfully done. But and it also helps the person think away from the physical pain and the sense of impending nothingness that they're facing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Valerie.
Val has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that Yale has an online course, excuse me, in happiness taught by Lori Santos. And part of the main portion of the course is what 5 kind actions can you take every day. And it's built upon growing a habit. And ultimately, it results in happier feelings for yourself and others. And it sounds so simple, but it's developing the habit of compassion, listening, patience, all the things, meditation. She includes that in her course.
I just throw it out. Maybe that's something that we could do together, where every day we take a couple of minutes and each person says what they have done to be of benefit to others. It could just be 1 or 2 things. It would make us think about it and be more conscious in our efforts to be of benefit to other people. And then we report. Just an idea.
You don't have to be big things. Unexpected acts of kindness are very powerful.
Indeed.
I think too, paying attention to the acts of kindness that are directed to us by other people around. I'm just sitting there thinking of a couple times today when other people gifted me with kindness. I think going both ways.
Yeah, that could be part of the report. Michael, were you going to say something?
I was going to emphasize what Steve said about just being able to listen and sit with our own discomfort and acknowledge it. That I think a lot of times we have to be aware of our own discomfort and be able to rest with it. Otherwise, we're not really open to whatever the other person's going to say. And that's really what's most helpful, for them to have the space to say what they need to say.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I hate this iPad. Something that I noticed I'm able to do now is I am nice too. I am pleasant with customer service people. It's what I do. But I noticed I used to be really pleasant, but if they got rude with me, I would go all teacher stink eye. You want to go? You're good. You're going. And I don't do that anymore. I just, whatever it is, for them. I just keep being as pleasant as I can be, and I like that.
We're just about at the end of the hour. So I encourage anybody who hasn't spoken and wants to speak to speak. It's wonderful to hear from you.
I'll say that I like Michael's idea about holding the discomfort, like experiencing that discomfort when someone says something you don't like. You know, I think all I need to say is it is an election year in the United States, and you can infer as much from that as you like. And Thanksgiving is coming. I'm sure it's going to be fiery. So being able to let that space occur without biting the hook as you've instructed so often in the past. And I was thinking about the small things. I let a tractor trailer truck in on the interstate when they had no other chance. There was a spider stuck on my window. I stopped what I was doing and I let the thing out. I could have smushed it. So I start small and it feels good. And then you do bigger things. So I like the idea of telling what we've done, no matter how small it might be. And I'm sure that spiders out there still doing their thing.
Great. I think it could be fun. Well, it's 7 o'clock or 5 o'clock. Right, 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. 9 o'clock here.
Want to put up the chance, Michael? Or should
I
I?
can do that. I can do it. So we have discussion group tomorrow night. I will be traveling to Massachusetts tomorrow for my grandson's birthday. If I'm back in time, I'll join you, but you never know how these things work out. But in any case, do come to a discussion group.
Val and I will be there. This is
And
such a rich topic. People let down their hair. It's really be something.
let me put up the chat. I should mute us. We'll close with dedication of the merit generated through our practice and study, and all our whatever actions of compassion we've taken, all to the benefit of all sentient beings. By this merit may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom, may the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled, may all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Michael.
Good night.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Party.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
See you tomorrow.
Okay.
Maybe. Bye.